Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Here we go.
All right.
Welcome to our Rio Valley Home Educators series. This is the first episode of this series for the year 25-26. And today we are going to be looking at unlocking your child's potential using IXL.
Got questions, we'll let the learning sink in. From the ABCs to far off stars, you'll learn so much wherever you are. It's the Rio Valley Home Educators Learning Series, making every day bright and every lesson a breeze.
All right, so welcome to the Rio Valley Home Educators series. This podcast, it's also a video that you can watch, where we're going to help you steer your homeschooling or independent study journey with confidence and creativity. Today, we're diving into the powerful tool that many homeschool and independent study families are using to personalize their child's education, IXL. So have you ever wondered how to pinpoint exactly where your child stands academically, create a roadmap to help you and help them grow, and to navigate this situation? Well, today I am joined by curriculum expert and independent study teacher, Sarah Martinez. And Sarah, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. I'm just so excited.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. So many of us as homeschooling and independent study parents and teachers are looking for a way to make sure that our students are on the right track. So, Sarah, where do you recommend we start with a tool like IXL?
Yeah, good question. Um, it really depends on how you're using it, whether it's your intervention or you're using it to support your curriculum. But let's start out with the intervention path. What I would suggest to get started here is to do what's called step into the arena. And IXL will give your student a diagnostic test and figure out what skills they'll need to work on. To access this, when they go to their home screen, you'll see this green button on the right, and that will bring them to that diagnostic test. It will start off very easy and get harder as they go. Um, they'll need to do that for both their math and ELA. And once they complete that, we can walk you through how to use that to pick out your skills.
That's awesome. So, after the diagnostic is complete, what do we do with this information?
Yeah, so once your student has completed their diagnostic, you will be able to, under your assessment, see the skills they need in this window. This student has not completed the assessment, so there's no data here. But once they do, there'll be some scores as well as some links they can pick to access assignments. There's also a way to view that all in one document, which I really like to use by clicking your print action plan. And once you open that, you'll see something that looks like this. This will a first grader, and this will show their overall level. And then each sub strand of our standards is broken down. So within the numbers and operations strand, you can see this recommended 2 skills for the student to work on. And they can just click from right here and go ahead and open that straight to the skill. I would recommend bookmarking this on your student's device so that it's easy for them to find. And they can just slowly start to work their way through their skills. How often do you have your students update their diagnostic, Ashley?
I'd say weekly, if not bi-weekly. It's definitely probably going to depend on the teacher and how they're utilizing the data. Weekly, I feel like gives you the most up-to-date skills because as they're learning information, I feel like that helps a lot with that growth factor. And there's also in the analytics, I believe you can see some of that growth, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, and I believe once the first test is a little bit longer, but once they've completed that, the weekly stepping into the arena is much shorter. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've
They
I've heard that. I think that it's only like 15-20 minutes from there for each subject.
Okay, so that's a good way to keep the skills updated and constantly be finding things that are really targeted for your student.
Awesome. So once we have our action plan and we move into the actual part of our learning, what would be the best way for us to utilize these skills to see the most progress for our students?
Yeah, are you, sorry, from the diagnostic or from, I got lost. Okay,
From the action plan, from the
yeah,
step into the arena diagnostic,
yeah.
or I know that Rio Valley also does a map integration. So for either one of those, would you be able to give us more information on how that works?
Yeah, so again, once you have your skill report, your students can click through and just go ahead and open those skills. Um, you can kind of decide if you want your student to work just from top to bottom or focus on a certain strand. I would recommend looking at whatever strand is lowest to start. So if you look at these numbers by the star, that shows their score for that skill. This particular student did pretty well in the measurement strand. So I would look at one of the numbers that are lower, like the 70 and or 60, and have her focus on those skills to start.
That's a
Um,
great idea to kind of just start with those areas where they actually need the most support. I love that.
yeah. And there is also the option to use your map data to drive your standards. This student hasn't taken the map test, they're younger, but for the third graders and up, you can find that, I believe, right here on the bottom right. There would say map skill plan, and that would work almost exactly like the arena skill plan would, where it's taking the information from your map test and figuring out what skills you need to use there.
That's awesome. So then would you also recommend that they start with those lowest skills from their map testing and move on from there as well?
Absolutely. Whatever strand you notice is the lowest, so these numbers in operation or algebra and algebraic thinking, I would start there on the map plan as well.
Awesome. So once we have the skill plan in place and they're practicing skills, what does that look like for my student?
Yeah, so let's take a look at what a lesson would look like off of a skill plan. Okay, so the window looks like this. Um, one thing I want to point out is there's always an example problem that you can access that'll walk you through the solution. There's also a video that the students can watch that will give some instructions on the topic. So I would suggest them starting by at least watching the video. Now, as students answer the questions, right or wrong, that'll adjust their SMART score. For younger students, it's really worth pointing out that they can click this. So even if their reading skills aren't quite ready yet, they're still able to hear about the question. So as a student gets a problem right, they get that little great job. And you notice right here on the right, your SMART score goes up. If a student gets a problem wrong, then IXL also gives them an explanation. So I encourage you not to just skip past this, but to really look at where the student got wrong. And you can hit got it to move on. When I got that problem wrong, my SMART score dropped a bit. So this is adaptive. It's not about how many questions in a row you got and getting a grade, but it's about proving to the program that you've mastered the skill. I require for my intervention students to get a minimum of 80 on their SMART score. Is that the same number you use, Ashley?
It is, yes.
No, yeah. So once they get to 80, they earn a ribbon. They do have the option to keep going all the way to 100. So sometimes I'll make my kid go back and get a little extra practice to get all the way from 80 to 100. But in terms of the intervention part and meeting the requirements, they need to get that SMART score of 80.
Nice. So it seems like there's a lot of nice scaffolds within the program to help the students be successful. So other than it reading out loud and the tutorials, are there any other things that might be beneficial for the students to know about when they're looking at the problems that could help them?
Absolutely. One tool I really like to point out is this pencil in the bottom right hand. Um, Especially as the students get older, I encourage them to use this to maybe um, check off the boxes they've counted or do some of their work. In my math class, I always work on highlighting parts of the problem with that tool to help them figure out what the question is asking. So this is a really nice tool in the bottom to help us out. Um, if you see your student is getting them wrong a lot and their SMART score is not going up, maybe they need something to scaffold towards that skill. And if you scroll to the bottom, they will always give you a suggestion for something that might help you get ready to complete this lesson. So sometimes you might need to circle back and try the one that leads into it to complete first and then get you ready for that.
That's awesome. So there's step-by-step instructions. It seems like everything is built in to support the students' learning, and also us as parents and home educators to be able to help our students be successful with the program.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Seems like a really fantastic feature. So since we are homeschool and independent study parents, we're also the ones who keep track of our students' scores, the ones who keep track of our children's grades, and then also their biggest supporters and cheerleaders. Can you tell me a little bit more about how IXL supports or helps with that?
Yeah, so I know as a parent, we want to maybe not just take their word that they did their IXL, but really be able to check in with them. So if you go to your My IXL, the main page of your student's dashboard, and scroll down to the bottom, you can see what they've done so far this week. That you can see how many questions they've answered, how long they've spent, and the progress they've made in a skill. Now, this is similar information that your teacher will pull up at the end of the week. So make sure you talk to your teacher about what the expectation is, but generally it's 2 skills per week per intervention subject. As the student spends more time, this is a new account, there will be a drop down to adjust the time period. So it'll default to looking at the whole year, but if you're checking your students' work for the week, you're going to want to adjust it to the this week drop down. If you click the View Student Summary Report, it will give you a little bit more information. It will tell you if they're proficient in the skill and anything they need to work on below. Again, this one hasn't been completed, so it doesn't quite have that information yet.
I love that.
Right here,
So, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to
yeah,
interrupt, but I noticed if my students are showing that they're proficient in a skill, but I noticed that they keep working on similar skills or the same skills over. Do you have any suggestions on what I should do in those instances?
yeah, that's why it's just really important to maybe check which ones they're working on every so often. Students do tend to like to take the easiest route. So if there's a skill that they found easy, or maybe they weren't paying attention on the assessment, they're going to tend to gravitate towards those. So I have run into the instances where maybe an 8th grader had a skill on there about first grade counting money, and they're going to gravitate towards those easy skills. And you'll see they maybe only spent 4 minutes to get their SMART score. So that's when we do need to, as a parent, check on this diagnostic report and see if our students are picking the most appropriate skills for that.
If I'm noticing that my student is only spending 4 minutes and they're getting that 80% SMART score, would you recommend that I have them do another one to really kind of get that good practice and like intervention in that they might need?
Yeah, totally. While we do say 2 lessons a week, I'm sure you know that if they're spending 4 minutes, they're really not growing from that. So in that case, I would maybe look more at the time and push them to do a little more. But once we get dialed in with picking the right skills that really are going to help that students, I would say 15, 20 minutes is about what I'm seeing to complete a skill that is maybe just slightly challenging for a student. Would you agree that's the time frame that
I would
you've
say
been kind of
for
seeing?
my own children, yes, I've noticed that.
Mhm.
About 15, 20 minutes for those just right skills. So those
Yeah.
ones, like you said, if they're scoring in the 200, and they're a first grader, that's like a second grade level skill, they're probably going to move through those a little bit faster if they have more proficiency in those. So definitely looking at those scores where they're the lowest, it does take them a little bit more time to get those down correctly. So I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, and kind of the opposite end of that is sometimes they'll choose skills that are much too easy. But if you find your students working on a skill where they're just getting one wrong after the other, all that's really doing is creating frustration for them. So that's when you might need to step in as the educator to help them, or maybe direct them to the skill below, like I showed before.
Mhm.
It's also worth noting that there are some lessons built in. So maybe it would look like you need to open up a lesson on the skill you're working on and kind of go through the steps together, maybe watch that video together. These are also printable, which is nice if you hit this little icon. And that might be a way to support your student to start being able to complete that skill more independently.
That's awesome. I didn't know that you could do that. I knew that there were lessons embedded, but I didn't know that you could actually go and print them. I think that would be super beneficial, especially for some of our parents and teachers who are working with the students on trying to really build those skills, to do that one-on-one learning with them and have the printout instead of necessarily having to sit in front of the computer the whole time. I like that.
Yeah.
So, as far as tracking progress and motivating learners, is there any part in here that helps with motivation or things that could keep them wanting to come back to IXL?
Yeah, and probably more for the younger students. One thing that you can check on for the younger students is at the bottom, as they complete certain amounts of time or lesson, it will generate awards. So sometimes just printing that off as a token for the younger kids can be really motivating. I believe they also earn coins towards awards. Can you break that down a little more? I haven't used that feature too much.
I actually haven't used that feature. So I'm assuming that that would be something along the lines of where you would set up a reward system within your home or your classroom,
Mhm.
and then they would be able to redeem from whatever it was that you set up, going forward to be able to earn certain activities or things that might be personalized to your student.
Yeah, thanks for that. That'd be a really cool idea. All right.
So, as far as the flexibility of this program, how do you think it would be best for home educators to kind of integrate this into what they're already doing, right? Like, we're already doing so many different things with our curriculum. We're already doing a lot of extracurricular activities and really trying to have well-rounded students. How do you see this integrating into our daily routine?
Yeah. We went over in depth how to use it for an intervention. So let's talk about how to use it to support your curriculum. This is mostly the way I'm using it with my own daughter. We're doing some other programs for our intervention, and I'm using this to support the curriculum she's doing. So there's a few ways to do that. If to start off, we can just go to the learning and go to the skills map and find the appropriate grade level. Um, this will break down the strands. So this is one option, is to kind of look through here and say, hey, we've been working on converting place values, and I found a lesson that is the same skill we've been practicing in our curriculum. Um, I can go ahead and have the student work on that as kind of reinforcement for what we're already doing. And I like to break that up into separate chunks so it doesn't just become too much on top of the math lesson we already did. A tip for that is if you needed to maybe direct your student what lesson you want them to do, put it in their planner, something like that. If you hover over the skill, right here where it says search shortcut, it will give you a 3-letter or number code. So what I'll do is write down that code on my daughter's planner. So if she needs to get on here without me, she can just type those letters here in the search bar and click the skill that comes up. So if you as a parent want to be able to look through and really pick exactly what you want your kid to do each day, that's a good way to access it. There are some other ways that you can go about choosing which skills to do. In the learning, on here under skill plans, there are a few different options here. Here's that map path we talked about for the intervention. We also have a CAS prep section. So I really encourage my students as we get closer to testing to work through this skill plan. And what that'll do is, again, break down those sections. It even prioritizes what it thinks would be the most important area to start with.
I really
Um,
like that. So for the cast one, if I had a student that was doing an interim assessment band, an IAB, or a focused
mm,
interim assessment band, would you recommend that they take the clusters from IXL to support whatever it is that they're lacking in those FIABs or IABs?
Absolutely. So the IABs that we're going to be given are just small strands of the test. So these headers that you see here, numbers and operations, fractions, um, are going to be one of the specific focuses of that IAB. So once you do that and you find maybe any skill gaps that you went over with your teacher, then you could identify the area that you need to work on here in this plan.
Awesome. I love
Um,
that. Another way to scaffold our students' learning and make sure that they're getting all the things that they need. That's great.
yeah, and there's a lot of other skill plans available. One thing I love is in the textbook section, most of the major available curriculums are built in. So right now I'm using Dimensions. If I go to that Dimensions tab, there is my kid's textbook. I can navigate by chapters, and it's going to actually give me skills specific to the lesson we did. So we just completed lesson 6 today. I am going to have her later on today work on the lesson that goes with it. This is exactly the same skill we were doing in our textbook where we need to compare numbers. And again, I wrote down this code for her so she knows which one to do when she gets on there. And it's just all tied together. Sometimes it can feel like we're doing a million different things, which we all are no matter
Yeah.
what. But this really streamlines it. So it's not they're learning 7 different things, but they're really just it's reinforcing your curriculum.
I like that. I feel like that would also give me good assessment data for one, for me to give to my teacher when I'm having my 20-day meetings, or just for me to be able to see, like, do we need to go back and revisit this? Like, if their SMART score on lesson 6 is a 50 on their independent practice, then we really need to go back and revisit that lesson before we move on. I really like that.
Yeah, and certain curriculums have less independent practice than others and are more hands-on and focused on the lesson. So for those types of programs, I really encourage even more so to use this as a reinforcement to the skills you're working on. You can even pin this for your student. Um, so once you find the skill plan you want, there is a way to mark it for your student, and it may just need to be a bookmark. But if you ask your teacher, they can actually pin it so it'll be at the top of the student's dashboard.
That's awesome.
The one other one worth looking at is you can just work through the California state standards. Um, this is again just if you don't really wanting to go through having to tie it to where your book is at, or maybe you're in a curriculum more like Saxon where it's a spiral of skills. In that case, you might just use this Common Core state standard plan to kind of just make sure you're working your way through everything that should be covered in that grade level.
Nice. That's also really nice for those students that might be working a little bit below grade level or a little bit above grade level to make sure that there's no gaps in their grade level material, right? So let's say you had, I don't know, a fourth grader that was technically working at a fifth grade level and doing fifth grade curriculum, but you want to make sure that they're able to get all of those skills that would fold in nicely to what they need to be doing with the work that they're working on. This is a great way to make sure there's no gaps.
Totally. And we've been looking mostly at the math area right now in terms of tying it into your curriculum. But it is worth taking a minute to look at the ELA section because just like the math, it's broken into strands. So I believe all the way through third grade, we do have a phonics section or reading foundations. So this is a good way to practice those phonics and spelling patterns. I do find that these lessons are a bit shorter and go quicker. So I tend to like to use this reading strategy section. It's just a way to offer a ton of practice on reading and comprehension, and then the subsections. But even just within literary texts, you'll notice there's 8 whole practice lessons that they can use to practice that reading comprehension, and along with the questions that go with it. So there's really a ton of reading practice on here. Um, Even if it's not exactly what you're working on in the curriculum, students can always use that practice with the reading and the comprehension questions. There's also a writing section and a vocabulary section as the grades go up, that I would also kind of recommend incorporating, and as well as grammar section as the students get into older grades. So there's really a lot of parts in the ELA. So you really want to look at what does your student need the most practice with when you get to this part.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things that I've noticed for my kids personally is the vocabulary piece, right? Like being able to really break down those prefixes, suffixes, like what do those words mean in context? Because that can be really difficult as we're getting higher up in learning and higher up in reading ability to be able to put all of that together. So I think that'd be really awesome for me to look at for sure.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So while my student is working on this, how much support should I be giving them as a parent? Am I sitting right there with them? Are they doing it independently? What should that look like?
Yeah, good question. And I would say it depends on how you're using it and what skill you're working on. So if a student is working on something that they just worked on in their curriculum, I would suggest having them try it independently to start. Maybe be nearby to catch if they're starting to get them all wrong and getting very frustrated. But that's kind of like I'm using that as skill practice and an informal assessment almost. If you are using it for a skill they're not quite comfortable with, then it's good to sit with each other and kind of work through and discuss together. For the intervention part, I would encourage more independence on that piece as they are working on the below level standards. But again, you just want to keep an eye because it can be really frustrating to students to watch that SMART score drop and drop and drop. And it can create a lot of anxiety and nervous to pick the question because they know the more they get wrong, the longer they're working. So it's really finding that balance of we do want to let them get some wrong because it means they need more practice. If we sit and help them through every single problem, then they're really not able to do it independently. But if we're catching that they're just getting too many wrong, then that's the time to stop and reteach. As far as the independent part, I try and assign my daughter ones that I'm confident she'll be able to do independent. So it's maybe not something new to her, it's maybe something below grade level, but it's good practice, and I'm confident she can do it without needing any scaffolds or supports.
Awesome. So what else about IXL do you think that we should know?
Um, I think that you should just really look into all the different ways that you can use it. Um, it starts to kind of become this, oh, I have to check the box for my teacher, but it can really be such a great support to your curriculum and to match, really finding those skills. So I would just encourage it to not be something you need to complete at the end of the week. And there are just a lot of features I encourage you to kind of play around with. There's even some games accessible
Mm.
to students if you kind of scroll down past the skills. So that can be a really fun way to, um, just make it a little more interesting. They won't get credit for a ribbon here, but we all know games are a great way to keep students engaged and practice those skills.
So
Um,
reinforcing. Games can be so
yeah,
much fun and they just make learning come alive sometimes.
absolutely. And maybe we could talk a little bit about the different devices that
Yeah, that would be
Excel is
wonderful.
accessible on. So, what we're looking at right now is the student view on a computer, which I think a lot of students is how they're using it. But it is available as an app for both Android and iOS to use on either a tablet or a phone. I like using it this way. There are less bells and whistles available, though. You'll really just see the recommendations from your teacher. You'll see your recent skills, and you'll be able to access the skills to choose from the top. But they might not have all the skill plans and games and stuff on that version. I also noticed on the app version, and I wish we could pull that up, that instead of the grade levels, they have letters.
Oh,
So
interesting.
A, B, C, D, E for third grade. That confused me at first, and I had to kind of compare with my teacher dashboard. So
Hey,
it's worth
countdown.
noting. Yeah, so that's worth noting if you are using the app. But for students, it's almost nice that there's less to click around
Mhm.
on because it's really just streamlined to that lesson they're working on.
Awesome. I love that it's so accessible. So like For my family, we're constantly running around and doing different things, especially in the evening, which is when we like to do a lot of our extra intervention type stuff. So being able to put it on my phone or on a tablet for them to use while we're waiting for brother to get done with Taekwondo, or we're driving somewhere, I feel like that's awesome, especially for those times when we are planning on using it independently.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to add on, Ashley, or any parts of the program you wanted to look at?
No, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for giving us such a wonderful overview of how the program works. I know that are so many different components to this program and it can be used in so many different ways, but now we have kind of a nice overview of how we can integrate it for intervention into some of our daily work if we're looking for some extra support. And I think for me, really like that assessment piece, right? So they just kind of knowing, like we get MAP scores and we get kind of some of that other stuff, but knowing where our students are week to week can be really beneficial in making sure that we are closing some of those gaps and helping them prepare for the next grade level. So from like the initial diagnostic to that progress tracking and really being able to customize all of the learning. So I really appreciate you joining me today and sharing all of this wonderful information.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
For those of you that are looking for a little bit more, we will have an in-person session on September 25th at noon, and that'll be at the Rio Valley Lodi site. And more information will come out about that soon.
Well, I can't wait, Ashley. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Okay.